In a world where a host can't even operate his own microphone, a suit costs $400, and nobody knows what time it is, despite the clock that's literally built into the show, one man has the courage to stand up and say, it's in time, not on time.
Hello, welcome everyone. My name is Nick. With me today is Lance, and we're doing another live episode of Downtime. We're going to call it Downtime now. I hate changing the name of things, but Downtime is so much better than so here you go. You're on the inaugural episode of Downtime. Don't you feel special?
I try not to feel down.
Yeah. Well, then you haven't been watching the news, have you?
I try not to.
Yeah. Oh, dear Lord.
Honestly, I do. When my wife puts the news on in the evenings, I like to go downstairs and, watch Netflix or something for a while because my blood just boils watching the news.
So my wife, I like to, especially if we do something I'm really proud of. We beat mainstream media to something. We're the first ones with something, which we do our fair share of times. I like to tell her, so we're done with the show, and especially if I'm exhausted afterwards, I like to just go up and say, look, this is this thing we did. And if she's reached the point where she's like, look, you did a great job, I'm sure. I don't want to know. When you're streaming, she goes, Trump said something, he did something, he's starting an insert or something. Is it one of those things? I was just like, yes. She's like, okay, you did a great job. Don't tell me about it. I was just like, okay. Oh, dear Lord. And then this
involves the flamingo-haired gentleman. I don't want to hear about it.
Oh, Jesus, yeah. Well, so the two that are interesting. The first is it just happened. We just put this up on the news. Is Biden who. I mean, I'm thrilled that Biden is calling this shit out. It's just the problem is it's like, okay, I think it's what he needs to do. But the problem is I think it inflames tensions even more and makes an already bad problem worse. I don't know what the answer is, but he basically came out and said that, what was it he said? I had that on my phone, but something along the lines of this is a battle for the soul of this country and Trump is destroying it. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think if I agree with you, it makes me feel uncomfortable when the president does that. But at some point, you have to stand up and say, either we call this out for what it is, or we're effectively, ceding legitimacy to them by not saying what they really are.
Yeah, and I don't have an answer. I think, yeah. Well, that's why
I think it speaks volumes that we've gotten to the point where you have to do that.
Yeah, and where Biden's and you had said, and this is on our Discord, but you had said where somebody, somebody had asked Biden about Biden had basically said they're essentially fascists, or they're pretty close to fascists, and somebody had asked him, President Biden, what do you mean by that? He's like, you know what I meant. It's like, let's stop playing games. It's like, I do like this Biden. I don't. But it's and I guess Trump's got a rally. We posted this one on the Discord too. Trump's got a rally coming up on Sunday. And he said he's going to say a lot of things nobody's heard before. He's going to drop some truths on everybody. And I was just like, oh, fuck. But he also said, and there's already people gathering in anticipation. So this came out on social media. So somebody just tweeted like, hey, that's like 4 miles from me. Like, okay, that's it. I'm going to do some recon. I'll be back in a minute. And then we saw live footage there's nobody there. Nobody cares. It's just dead empty.
At this point, the only people who are even listening to the man are the loyalists who already have their minds made up, and nothing he says or anybody else says is going to change it.
How on earth how did this happen? How the hell did we get to this point? I mean, for me, I always go to lack of education.
I'm assuming I haven't voiced my opinion of how we got here.
Well, you may have, and it may refresh it, but please.
Yeah, I say this a lot to my dad, because every time we get together and politics come up, he's, I don't know how we got here, and I have to because he's sliding into the memory lane of early dementia. Yeah. Anyway, my feeling is what happened is the two parties created the situation, because the Democrats started catering to the fact that much of the population is concentrated in the urban centers, and in the urban centers you have a more eclectic group of people who are better educated, more diverse, etc. So that became the area they targeted, and that's how they framed all of their, for lack of a better word, advertising. The Republicans were trying originally, way back when, so to speak, it was targeting the well-to-do and business owners and such. And I think they realized the numbers there are shrinking to the point where they couldn't ever have a legitimate chance of getting a majority anymore. So they had to go find somebody to bring their numbers up. So they started talking to the wackadoodles, the extreme religious right, the racists, the authoritarian thugs, those kind of people. And kind of like the German industrialists who looked at Hitler and said, oh, we can control him. We don't have to worry. He's just some stupid tin pot who mobilizes the mob. And as I think recent events have shown, the Republicans, who are the stand-ins for the wealthy industrialists, have realized that no, they can't control it. The mob is now in charge, and this guy is controlling the mob, and they're along for the ride, desperately holding the ears of the tiger, hoping they don't fall off and get eaten. And the flip side of that analogy is, remember that before he moved on socialists and trade unionists and even the Jews, he purged his own party. The night of the long knives, where Hitler goes out and just literally decapitates the entire head structure of the SA, because he saw Rome and that group as his primary rivals to power. And I think the Republicans are beginning to realize and when I say Republicans, I mean the old classic style Republicans, are beginning to realize they're in that slot right now. And if the wackadoodles take charge again under Trump or some other person like that, they're going to be the first ones on the chopping block before all the others.
Well,
and so that's where I think we got to where we are now. The Republicans aren't confident enough or powerful enough to regain their own party and make it a legitimate conservative party anymore. It's become the ultra-right, wacky, theocratic, whatever, extreme right. And the Democrats, in large part, because of all the defections of classic Republicans into the Democratic Party, has kind of shifted into the center, which in turn has alienated true leftists who are in that block with the Democrats. And they're going increasingly saying, hey, I don't want any part of what you guys are putting on anymore, because you're not listening to my concerns, the things I want to do as a progressive. And so I think we're seeing a start of what might, I don't think it will happen, but it could, of us morphing from a 2 to a 3-party system. But I suspect we'll end up Yeah, I don't think it will either. The way the Constitution and all the traditions of how power is managed are built are going to just continue a two-party system. But you're seeing strains within both parties, and that group in the center, the conservative Democrats and the moderate Republicans, are finding a lot more to agree with one another than they are with the fringe elements, so to speak, of their own parties. And the other part of that is those fringe elements are now large enough and dominant enough that it's causing problems for that center group of how to maintain control.
Yeah, somebody in the live chat. Yeah, somebody in the live chat pointed out the hang Mike Pence, and I think that's a huge part of the. So what they have to explain their failure to seize power to this point, and the best explanation for that is going to be people who have not been orthodox to the doctrine. So that'll be anybody who's ever criticized Trump, anybody who's they're going to say, before we can actually deal with the left and get the Democrats and do all this other stuff, we have to deal with the people in our own party who don't fit the new orthodoxy. And yeah, I think that's
purge the rhinos. And you hear that a lot now. Yes.
I mean, I think the only thing that, well, I don't know what's going to stop it. Right now, I'm hoping that I think Garland really has his teeth into this, and I don't think he's going to let go. I've been wrong about calls like this in the past, so I'm a little tepid in my optimism. But and it seems very difficult. I can't think of a way where if they choose to go after Trump, they're not going to get him on the Mar-a-Lago documents.
Yeah, and I think there's so much stuff built up now. Any one of them individually, you might be able to squirm out from under, but this mountain of stuff, criminal activity, conspiracies, everything, just stacked one on top of the other. It's like one of those bricks is going to come out and the entire tower is going to collapse.
I hope so. I've been saying that. I was stunned when the Southern District of New York decided not to go after him. I was like, from what I can tell, they had him. The two lawyers who defected and bailed, they said, look, they seem to think there was easily enough to convict, but that's not even the bar. The bar is there enough to at least where you have the theoretically a conviction is possible, enough to indict. You only need to indict. I forget what the bar is on that, but nonetheless, they're like, yeah, they could sail over it. And this is the Southern District. They put away some. I don't know what the hell's going on over there. It's depressing. He seems so bulletproof. It's really amazing, and
it's all money, and it's not just him. He has a lot of extremely wealthy and powerful and sinister backers. They're if you dig deep enough, you know who they are, but for the most part, they're people, the gray people that are in the mist that you don't really see, you don't ever hear about. They don't say stuff that embarrasses themselves. But when it comes to protecting their interests, and at least him as he represents their interests, they will do anything necessary.
Yeah, but the Southern District has gone after those folks before. Unless I mean...
Yeah, so, in other words, those folks are ones who have a particular, incentive to go after Southern District somehow and neutralize it.
Well, maybe they did. Maybe I'm missing something. I suppose that's what I should have thought of first. I mean, having those two lawyers resign was shocking. I was like, okay, so that at least it was affirming, because I'm sitting there going like, if I'm reading this correctly, they've got enough to nail him. What are they not doing? Then when the two lawyers resigned and they said, yeah, we've got enough to nail him, and they're not going to do it. Yeah, that makes sense. I don't know. I've been predicting
money under tables. Yeah, money under tables or envelopes with embarrassing photos, you name it. There's 1,000 ways to coerce and pressure people to decide things in your favor.
So we almost, slightly aside, kind of the same topic, but we almost couldn't do the show today. We had our license pulled. We were told we couldn't stream, we couldn't broadcast, we couldn't upload video, couldn't even contact our community page. We were basically locked out of the In Time channel. The reason was because we had done a show, and when Liz Cheney was up for her primaries, and this is one that we've had some debate about here, which is I am in fact a fan of Liz Cheney, and I'm aware that that's how the vote gets split on the Democratic side. But yeah, she's doing really her job, and maybe you shouldn't get applauded for doing your job. But when you've got that many people in your own party who are willing to utterly obliterate you, and she's standing up for the right, I'm no fan of the Cheney family. We have but she's doing the right thing, and that is in short supply over there.
I totally get it.
So I decided I wanted to be streaming when her results came in. We knew what they were going to be. But I was just like, you know what? I wanted to be on air and just be there when the results came in. So we knew what was going to happen. And Palin was up anyway. So we're like, okay, we get to do a show on the lulls. So Cheney lost, and we were reading Trump's response to her loss, and we were mocking it before I was just like, okay, this is what he's going to say. He's going to say this. So it's just like we already know what he's going to say. It's the same shit he always says.
Oh yeah.
So we read the statement. We mocked the statement. We were just like, oh god, it's this bullshit. And it's like we already have the video of him coming out like that Saturday after January 6th, and he's just like, look, and he essentially suggests that the election wasn't rigged, and he kind of admits when they're prepping for it, okay, it wasn't, but I'm not going to say that, yada, yada, yada. And then he's back on this full, it was rigged thing. So I was just like, so we're just tearing into the statements. YouTube flagged us for propping up misinformation about the 2020 election. All we did was read his statement. And they're like, this violates our misinformation policies regarding the 2020 election. You guys said it was rigged, and of course it wasn't rigged. I was like, we were quoting Trump's statement on the loss of Cheney. I was just like, if you've watched this program for more than 10 seconds, you're aware of our position on misinformation. So, so they pulled it.
Which one owns YouTube?
Google.
And Google is owned by
Alphabet, but I don't know who owns that. This happens, and we won the appeal, which is why we're streaming, because the strike took down the channel, and we were not. But what they do is they just scrub the audio, and if you say certain keywords, basically they flag you, they take you down, you're guilty until proven innocent, and if you during the appeal can say this is how. So
I just got locked out of Facebook for 7 days for literally putting a quote from a movie in it in humorous context, but apparently the fact that I used a specific word scared everybody, and so I'm not allowed to post for 7 days.
Yep, and I've had a lot of people have that happen on Twitter as well. Twitter's a lot of people I've been talking to have been reporting. They'll say something. There was when Ethan, who I don't think you've ever streamed with, but the way he lost his primary Twitter account was he took Trump's statements about what we were going to do to the Iraqis, and this was back when he was talking about basically we're going to commit war crimes against. Actually, was it Iraq or was it Iran? I think no, he was talking about Iran. We're going to destroy these, and so Ethan took those exact words and then retweeted it, but he changed the groups. If I recall, I may be remembering this somewhat inaccurately, but he changed the groups to like, okay, we're going to do this to black people or to this or to that, and it was so horrific. But you could see that once it was put in a context that made more, and Twitter's like, you can't say this. He's like, I'm quoting the President of the United States. Are you saying I can't quote the President of the United States? And the answer was no. Yes, that's exactly what they're saying. Yes, exactly.
Yeah, and that's what gets me is what I find interesting is I track a number of right-wing sites, and they can post the most absurd, over-the-top, horrible stuff. And as far as I can tell, they never get censored or blocked. But if somebody on the left says even the slightest thing that might be construed by, some guy in a Klan hood as being critical of him, bam, you're locked out, you're evil, we're going to send the snipers and have you killed tomorrow.
Yeah, it's
and I think part of it is that the people who own these big conglomerates are all that ultra-wealthy class, and they view anything on the left as a threat to their power, their wealth, their influence, and so they are acting to protect their own interests by shutting down dissent. I'm not saying it's a plot, because that would require coordination and planning.
Yeah.
I'm not sure they're at that stage yet. I just think that's the instinctive reaction, and they've set their algorithms to look in that kind of direction.
Yeah, I'm the last guy to detect the plots. It seems to me that it's self-interest, but it's self-interest in trying to protect the business, the company, because what ends up happening is what is it? Democrats are what was the line? No, okay, no one. Okay, I thought of one line. It was the wrong one. We're so tolerant of they're even tolerant of intolerance. But that's what was the. Dear Lord, I can't remember the line, but it does seem to me like I see this from a slightly different perspective. It seems to me that the left has, and it's tough, right? Because we've got people like Trump who are saying things that are observably, demonstrably false, and it's creating a lot of problems. Misinformation is probably one of the biggest problems of this generation. But on the flip side, while not a free speech absolutist, for me, for the most part, I'm like, okay, the best way to destroy bad ideas is to talk about them. And so I tend to be much more, and it seems like the right's actually doing better about that right now, at least ideas that they think are bad. No, you know what? Maybe I'm giving too much charity to it. It's just it seems like they're more tolerant of ideas that are challenging than we are, and I've kind of felt that way. Okay, so when Dave Chappelle did his comedy routine. I heard some pieces of it. It was immensely offensive. I listened to it. We did a show on our view on it, and just to be on the extra safe side, I talked to some liberal friends of mine, and the number of liberal friends of mine that agreed with our interpretation, but said, I can't say that. I can't sit there and say, no, there was more nuance to what he was doing if you look at the whole thing and if you're not looking at it with your mind already made up going in. And the number of liberals who said that they did not want to say that, and people that I respect who did not want to say that because of what they could be called, what it could do to them. And that's just on something where I think we have the ability to disagree. And I tend to think there was more nuance there than he was given credit for. But you say that, and you risk a lot in this environment. And you don't seem to as much on the right.
There are those wings on either side of the political spectrum that have gotten much more powerful and influential than they used to be. And anybody who disagrees with them, particularly people on their own side of the divide, those are the enemies. Those are the ones you hit first. The fact that, and I can't give a good example, but let's say somebody on the right says, oh, we need to take away women's right to vote because women are nuts or something. You're less likely to see this guy flame sprayed by people on the left. What they'll do is flame spray anybody who says, well, I can see some of his argument. I disagree with his general thrust. I disagree with the details, but there are a few elements of what he said here that we might want to consider. Those are the
That's
people that
interesting.
the guys on the left are going to hit far harder than they'll hit the guy who actually made the statement.
That's a really good point. Why is that, do you think?
It's doctrinal purity, because we have become increasingly divided and increasingly radicalized on both sides of that spectrum. It used to be, and I don't want to, say, oh, the 50s or the 40s or whatever, but it used to be, and how far back you want to go to say that is up to you, that the vast bulk of what was done politically in this country was done within that center spectrum. You had center right, center left, and you had true centrists. You had very few people that were on the extremes on either side, and for the most part, they were viewed by everybody on either side of the political divide as dangerous whack jobs. So you get a case of, what was it, the Skokie, Illinois Nazis doing their little parade in a Jewish community thing. Everybody, for the most part in this country, was absolutely outraged by the fact that they ruled these guys could legally do their little march. They were offended by it because it was extreme. Even the people on the right, the centrist conservatives, were horrified that this was being allowed. In today's environment, it would be, straight down that divide middle. It's okay. It's horrible. There's very little center ground that's looking for a, maybe this isn't horrible. Everybody wants to be on the extreme. And I think that's where things are going bad, is we have lost that ability to compromise. We have lost the ability to be willing to see that there is some justification in the other side's views. We don't necessarily have to agree with those, but we can see how they arrived at those views and admit that perhaps from their perspective, these are justified. That isn't happening anymore. Nobody wants to play that game. There's, black and white, good and bad, up and down.
You had said this, and I think this is interesting because it's very rare I've heard anyone concur with this, and I'm wondering if you and I may agree on this point, which was, if this so-called American experiment fails, which I've said that before, and people are like, well, it's been going on for, 250 years, so how can you say, if it fails, it's already a success? Like, well, but if it fails, and people are always saying, what could have been done differently in the Constitution? What might have been added or removed that would have worked better? And for me, and one of them that I've always said is political action committees, money. You shouldn't be able to put money into politics the way it is now. But I don't think it's that anymore. What I think it is the executive branch being winner take all. Because it's winner take all. You can have any number of parties to start with, but eventually you will end up with only two parties. And the reason is because anybody who is not in one of those two parties does not have enough power on their own to do anything. You're either going to
they're irrelevant.
Yep. So you're going to pick the one that's closest to what you agree with and hope to have some power in that party, as opposed to trying, because we don't have a parliamentary system or anything like that. And my understanding, not being an expert, is that we chose not to do a parliamentary system exclusively because that's what the Brits did. And we're like, no, fuck you. There was still at least some power sharing, only in as much as the vice president was supposed to be whoever came in second, despite the fact that the vice president actually technically has no power. No, the vice president has two powers. they get to tie break the Senate, and then in terms of the executive branch, they've got one power, which is if the president is removed from office or dies or anything like that, then they can become the president. That's their only power. Okay, so you've got this winner-take-all system. It sounds like you were thinking somewhere along. So do you think that that's sort of a Persian flaw in the system, or a flaw that's possibly even fatal to the system?
I'll start by admitting I don't know what a Persian flaw is, so you'll have to describe that to me in a minute. But generally speaking, I can get the gist of what you're saying. I would agree with you. I think that's one of the main things, is that the system is built where it forces groups to work with one another who don't necessarily agree with one another, and makes at least intended, I think this is what was actually intended, it makes a centrist position the only viable one. And that centrist position, originally with two parties that were effectively left center and right center, it worked. But people have been very carefully, and now with all the data processing abilities and mass media and all of that, which didn't exist when the Constitution was written, they have found a way to exploit that for their own personal preferences and their own personal profit, realizing that if you can create division, that allows you to target messages to achieve your personal goals. And I think that's one of the issues that really is at the heart of the problem, not just the one you're talking about, but the way that ties in with the fact that the Constitution as drafted in the 1770s is not really viable in a modern setting with all the technological advances that the founding fathers couldn't have imagined in their wildest dreams. And it's one of those, it would be a wise move, I think, to do a constitutional convention, except there are groups that are actually that I know of on the right that are actually working deliberately towards that, because they've already put in place ways to manipulate such a convention to achieve their goals. So you don't get an open convention where everybody's trying to decide what's best for the country. You get a convention where a small group of oligarchs get to decide how to put themselves at the top of the pinnacle and damn everybody else.
Yep.
So we built a system with its own poison pill.
I was looking at the sentencing of one of the January 6th guys, not the most recent one, the one before the most recent one. The most recent one's this former cop who got the highest sentence so far of anybody, but it was the one right before him. And the judge had said, you're meddling with this, and you're going in and you think you're saving this country or whatever it is that you think you're doing. Like, we had a completely unbroken streak of doing that miracle. And I think you talked about that before. Washington, resigning his commission and turning over control. Since then, this completely unbroken history on the transfer of power to whoever won the election, and we had that until you came along. It's just like, yeah.
But I think the key takeaway there is so many of the people who did January 6th, their opinion is that stopping that peaceful legal transition of power is what they want. They want to end democracy. They don't want those people, in big quotes, making decisions on how the country is run. Only I get to choose, or people just like me.
How much of this do you think is cynicism? How many? It's clear that at the upper echelons of the Republican Party, the current Republican Party, they know exactly who Trump is. They know exactly what happened. They know exactly what was. Yeah, they know that. How many do you think of the average conservative, well, the average Republican today? How much do you think they know and or care that it wasn't actually rigged? The ones who are saying it was rigged, how many of them do you think actually believe it?
I think a lot depends on how you define Republican.
Yeah,
and
I was groping for.
No, I say that very honestly. I think you cannot categorize MAGAs as Republicans.
Yeah,
and if you exclude those, the orange base from Republicans, I suspect that remaining rhino group, or whatever you want to call it, probably less than a quarter of them believe that it was a rigged election, or that there was some huge, massive fraud or something going on. I think most of them believe and understand and accept, yeah, we lost. There may have been some iffy, small issues going on, but those happen in every election, and honestly, in a lot of cases, those iffy things that are going on tend to be much more pro-Republican than they are pro-Democrat. But the fact that the GOP is so dominated by that refusenik group of MAGAs who will never and can't now accept that the Republican loss in 2016, or excuse me, in 2020, was not due to massive fraud and plotting and every conspiracy theory you can drag out of your ass.
Rez was talking about, I mean, aside from the fact that Hillary actually, well, of course, won the popular vote in 2016, the other one is, and this one is one I worked on the Obama campaign, so I met him twice. When I say met him, in the same room, and he waved to me. I'll be honest.
Or at least one of the people standing near you.
No, it was to me. It was clearly to me. It was a small room, and he was coming through it. It was in New Hampshire. There was maybe 5 people in the room, 6 people in the room total, and he's acknowledging everybody in the room. I'm one of them. The other time he waved to me, yes, I was in a room of about 20,000 people, and it was still me. I know he recognized me, but at any rate. And it was my first big convention.
Führer was talking to me personally.
It was my first big convention, and I got the VIP seats because I was actually, this was in, I think, the 4th district, because it was Hartford, but my district had just knocked it out of the park, and we essentially flipped. We were projected to lose to Hillary. We flipped it. We got it to Hillary, and it was the district that I was the head of was the one that flipped it. So I was just like, I was really proud. I said, okay, you're getting VIP seats. You're going to get to meet Obama. You're going to meet Caroline Kennedy, Ted Kennedy, all of these others. And I'm thinking, great. But what I had failed to realize, I had set up more than a few of these, so I knew kind of how it worked. But I'd set them up. I'd set up like one in Keene, New Hampshire, and like a 200 venue in a church. No, this was Hartford, Connecticut. So I got the best seats in the house, the VIP seats, which is directly behind everybody. You're in the back, and the reason is so that when the cameras are showing the candidate, you can see all the VIPs directly behind them supporting the candidate. They're the worst seats in the house. All you see is the candidate and the cameras. And the back of the candidate. I mean, he's looking at everybody else. It's just like, what the fuck?
Yeah, you're there to be seen by the mob as opposed to the candidate.
Yes, which I had, yes. But now wait a minute. What am I? Oh yeah. So I remember the first time I realized that I had figured out how to detect Obama was lying, and I can't, and it's tough because I joined when he was polling at like 0.5% in the Democratic Party. So I'd be knocking on doors. Wow. And I'd be knocking on doors that open the door and say, hi, I'd like to talk to you about Barack Obama for a minute. And they're like, Barack oh, Baba Rama? Who? What? I was just like, Barack Obama. I get it. Let's talk.
What you talking about?
Yeah, exactly. So you don't do that unless you believe in the candidate. And I had volunteered for once before, but I managed to really get. It was a whole other thing. I'll talk about some other time. But I remember when I had first realized I could actually tell when he was lying, which in my view wasn't very often, but he did it during a debate with Hillary, and I was just listening casually in the background. It was still during the primaries, so I was working like 24/7, and I just heard him say something. I was like, oh God, he's such an idiot. That can't be true. He knows that's not true. I was like, oh shit. And so I was just like, that was a little kind of heartbreak for me, okay, fine. And then I knew when he said, okay, if the Syrians, cross this red line in the sand, whatever, if Assad uses chemical weapons, we're going in. And I said, oh shit, he just lied. And I knew for a fact he lied. And I was just like, now I'm curious to know who else knows, because if Assad figures this out, we're in deep shit. So yeah, I had seen him do all that. But what was the other one? I wanted to talk about something that he had said that wasn't. Oh dear Lord! Now I remember they were talking about Hillary's loss to Trump, and he said the CIA, all our agencies have looked at it, and the Russian interference was insufficient to hand Trump the victory. And the first thought is, I was like, I've looked at the numbers. It's pretty clear to me that but for the Russian interference, Hillary would have won. And the reason is, and you can do the math any number of ways, and any way you do it should have won, but the best, most accurate way to do it isn't to figure out the total number of votes, because she did win by the total number of votes. It's to figure out what's the minimum number of votes needed in certain districts in which states that would have flipped it so that she'd have gotten the Electoral College delegates she needed. And by every measure, it was only within a couple thousand votes.
Right, and that touches directly back to what you were saying about the two-party winner-take-all mentality. I mean, if you get rid of the Electoral College and you just based it on popular vote, it really would represent the will of the people as opposed to manipulation by other means.
And third-party candidates would have a shot.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, this is why. So my thinking is that Paul Ryan was actually the president. And I'm dead serious. I think Paul Ryan was the president prior to, and here's why. I think, and we learned later that there was a CIA release that, yes, in fact, the election interference was sufficient, that's why Trump won. Okay. If you're Obama and you know that, I think he lied. He had to know it. We know that's why Trump won. Obama had to know it. So why say no? The election was legit. Maybe he didn't want a constitutional crisis. Yada yada yada. But there isn't going to be a constitutional crisis. He cannot. As much as I think it's what's most fair, as much as I think it's right, he cannot sit there and say, well, we're just going to hand the election to Hillary because Hillary's on his side and he's snatching it from his political rival. I don't care that the CIA says quite credibly that Trump didn't legitimately win. Yeah. He cannot do that. So he cannot allow, and whether or not he has any say in it, but Biden was and we can get into all of that. But in my view, you can't let Trump win because he won by cheating. You can't hand it to Hillary because she is the preferred candidate of the party that is making these choices. So neither candidate could be allowed to have been said to win the election. That means there is no president come January 7th or whatever. That means it goes to the Speaker of the House, Paul Ryan. I think the only legitimate conclusion from that election is that Paul Ryan was in fact the legit winner.
That's the first time I've heard that, and that's a pretty convincing argument.
And by the way, we talk about compromise.
Snowball's chance in hell of ever getting through.
It's not. But yeah, it's just constitutional order of secession. The first two candidates have to be removed. It's Paul Ryan, who I despise, but it's the only thing Obama, I think, could have done. I think that's what Obama should have done. Now, could he do it? Well, obviously he'd need Biden to go along, and then yada, yada, yada. It's tough to say, but it would have been the right thing to do. So disappointed in that. That's why I think it's I think the honest president from that term was Ryan, and I am waiting. Somebody's going to do this. It's going to be one of those the sovereign state guys that have like studied the law and they think they're really it's going to be one of those who's going to break some law that was signed under Trump, and he's going to say, well, Trump wasn't really the president, it was Paul Ryan, and he's going to go out and make this argument. It's like, yeah, it's too late, it's like it's over. You don't get to do that, but somebody's going to make the argument.
Ship has sailed.
Yeah,
that ship has sailed. It sank en route. They salvaged the wreck and broke it up for scrap, and so don't even try, dude.
Yeah. Well, I think, and somebody had pointed this out. I know it was Titan, I think, just pointed out in the live chat that what they're saying is, look, and I do think there's some of this. The government is done with Trump, and obviously there are elements of the government that aren't looking at SCOTUS, but at any rate, presumably for having violated that law that he himself signed about confidential documents in the government, presumably he can't run for office again. Now, he hasn't been convicted, but I have to believe there's the pressure is on to hit him with this before. I don't know. I think it's going to get wild. I think we're going to be doing a lot of streaming over the next couple of months.
Yeah, I could even see the Republicans pushing that to just get him and the wackadoodles pushed to the sidelines for a little bit.
McConnell is almost kind of threatening to do that. I don't think he's got the balls. I don't think he's got the balls.
Yeah, well, they're all terrified of the base. They really are, because without the base, they're so minimal in numbers that they're almost third-party irrelevant in a lot of ways.
That's really...
They are.
No, I agree with you. I just think it's amazing that the plans, essentially the Rove, I don't want to say the Rove doctrine, but what was it? When Rove, came up with this idea for the permanent... the permanent conservative majority, of which is, I think, the precursor and just allowed all of this. It's like, okay, what they've done is they've essentially turned themselves into a third party. They've just completely, they're in the back of the bus, so to speak. Oh, dear Lord.
Well, I think they realized that to legitimize themselves, they had to, cozy up with one of the two established parties. Because, again, the way the Constitution is written, two-party is almost inevitable. You aren't going to get a third party. So the only way to make that work was to take the wingnut group and have them take over the party that represented or was closest to their beliefs, which they've effectively done.
I almost miss Kanye West. And you know the name of the party that he ran under, right?
No, I don't.
I'm not. You're going to think this is a joke. This is not a joke. I had to read this on air. We're like, okay, Kanye West has, announced, and he did the announcement by putting his face on Mount Rushmore. So we showed him on Mount Rushmore. Kanye West has announced, is under the newly formed birthday party. The birthday party candidate has decided that he's going to. Yes. I can still. I remember, friends. I was just like, I'm gonna pretend like this is completely normal.
We're becoming the movie Idiocracy. Oh my God.
It was. Yeah, so and I remember too when I was writing the script for, I'm just gonna pretend I'm just gonna go that off. I was like, hey, the birthday party candidate has said this, and that. I just played it with a straight face. I was like, no joke needed here.
That Monty Python sketch. Do you remember that? The Monty Python sketch where they had, conservative party, liberal party, very silly party, or silly party and then very silly party. And the names, of the candidates would be, John Smith, Conservative Party, Randall Johnson, Liberal Party, Wackadoodle Ding Dong, very silly party.
When you said the Wackadoodle Party, that's what got me thinking about Kanye West. And it's just like,
yeah, I know.
Oh dear Lord. So okay, hold on. I'm gonna yeah. All right, so oh God, I don't know. And what Kanye West was doing, cozying up to try. I don't even. It's funny. I started on YouTube's kind of through drama channels and all that other good stuff, and in time did a little bit of that as we started. But we're like, yeah, this isn't us. We're going to cover. So everyone's like, well, drama channel. It's like, do you have any idea how much drama, comedy, like all this shit I get to do just on a day-to-day basis? I was like, I write fiction books, right? I cannot write a book that has this happen because nobody would believe it. That was the old yeah. Oh, I was like, no, I wouldn't trade this for all the tea in China. I was just like, I get to go out and talk about the birthday party candidate. Oh, dear Lord. So, okay, I guess, pay attention to your chat. We love you. Well, thank you. Electoral College, abolishment and, felon votes. Yeah, I do think that's the other thing I've seen that argument about. I do think, and I'm aware that this tends to be a liberal position, and in part because liberals, felons and criminals tend to vote liberal, because I guess they're soft on crime or whatever the argument there is. I just think the problem is, they're still citizens. If you're incarcerated, you still have rights. You have fewer rights, but you still have rights, and it still matters to you and to your family that's on the outside, and yada, yada, where it goes. And if you don't have the right to vote, there's no incentive to protect prisoners. And that's how you end up with for-profit prisons. That's how you end up with, slave labor out of the prisons. And it's been mostly the left that's actually, fortunately, stopped that from happening. And I think that's why they tend to vote left. But if the right actually, gave a shit about felons and realized that, they're American citizens too, maybe they could snag some of that vote. And I'd still say that they should have the right to vote. I don't know what your thought is on that.
Well, the guys in prison with the swastikas, they can vote, but the rest of them, we're not going to have that.
Yeah.
We don't want those people.
The other thing, and this is one, Clinton came out and talked about some of his regrets, and it's funny, I think his biggest regret was not following Clark's advice and getting Obama when he could. He just assumed that whoever came in after him, which he thought was going to be Gore, but even if it was Bush, he's like, this is a national thing. This has nothing to do with parties. So, if it ends up being Bush, they'll go out and they'll get Obama. He's this huge threat. And then Condoleezza Rice was like, why is the Clinton administration so worried about terrorism? It's really a non-issue. It's like, oh.
You keep saying Obama. I think you mean Bin Laden.
Yes. Well, I'm tired.
Thank you. I really just wanted to make sure the audience understood where we were going.
Okay. If you are a YouTube censor who is currently watching this show, please be aware. Okay, that was a slip of the tongue. I am not trying to say Obama was responsible for it. Okay, I'm not even going to finish the sentence because somebody somewhere is just like, oh, okay, let's just nip that one in the bud.
And one JDM on Obama's bunker in the Hindu Kush Mountains, and everything would have been fine.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. Oh. So, Clinton had also said one of his big regrets was going along with the whole tough on crime and the idea that if you, Rez said the same thing. I think you mean, I don't mean Obama. Okay. I'm getting off this train. This train has already crashed. It is on fire, and I'm still trying to drive it. So we're gonna just pretend like none of that happened, and we're gonna try to ground this. So
you see, if you'd stuck with steam-powered trains instead of those damn diesels.
Yep, exactly. It's that darn technology. I was going to make another joke. I'm going to bail on it before. Tough on crime. There's this idea that, if something works, then more of it must work better. And, if prisons can act as a deterrent, which they kind of can, it doesn't really psychologically work that way. But then more prison time must work. The problem is, in your brain, the difference between 3 years in prison and 30 is actually almost negligible. Your brain is not capable of, they both have roughly the same impact on your life. When you get out of prison in 3 years, you know, if you had a girlfriend, she's not going to be with you anymore. You're not going to have your job anymore. Your car, home have probably all been impounded. At that point, there is basically no difference between 3 years, or negligible difference between 3 and 30. And your brain is not capable of processing that. So you might think that if you go from 3 years to 6 years in jail, it doubles the amount of deterrent effect. No, it adds something like 5% to 10% to the deterrent effect just by doubling the time. By the time you go to 30 years, it's maybe another 10% on top of that in terms of the actual deterrent effect. So we throw everybody in.
But it's a great sound bite to throw at the masses and say, you know, oh, we're getting criminals off the street and we're keeping them off the street longer.
Exactly.
You're just creating more hardened criminals, so when they get out, they have no other option but to continue to be criminals.
They get out, they have no job. Nobody wants to hire them. They have no car, but they're going to be productive members of society, and they can't vote. Tough on crime has been a huge disaster for this country.
Death sentence for parking violations, damn it.
What?
Death sentence for parking violations.
Yeah, I know.
That'd solve all the country's problems.
Oh, God. Well, and then, you know, the next thing is going to be, of course, to do what, and I think this is what happens. We talked about this, I think, on the last show, too, where, you know, it's like the Jim Crow South that try to make all these crimes that in particular black people were more likely to violate than that throw you in jail. And they added my favorite, which was if you are an ex-con, you have to have a license on you at all times. So the day you walk out of prison, the police would come up and stop you, and they'd sit there and say, yeah, what's your name? Okay, could I see your license? Oh, you don't have your license? Boom, you just violated parole. He literally just walked in.
Just put a circular door in the prison exit.
Yeah. Just come on out. You see the cops like, don't worry, I'm going right back in. You just turn around and just don't even bother. And that kind of thing happens when you don't give them the right to vote. And I understand. To tell you the truth, I find it's a little scary because there are sociopaths in there, so I find it a little scary giving a sociopath the right to vote. But I find it a little scary MAGA having the right to vote. And frankly, if they're going to have the right to vote, I don't understand why I would deny it to a sociopath. At any rate,
I would contend, but I would also contend at some point you can kind of make a decision that somebody is a sociopath who is not going to be coming out as a contributing member and not give them the right to vote or whatever, as opposed to those who are in there for a relatively minor infraction. They're going to be serving a brief period. You can actually put them through I don't want to say re-education because that reeks of the gulag, but some program that helps them when they get out find real employment in a career that will help them live. And I think a lot of people get into petty crime because they don't really have any other options. You can't survive, with a family of 3 if the only job you can qualify for is, flipping burgers. So unless you're going to raise burgers, flippers' wages to, a livable wage.
I think that's true. I think there's a lot to unpack there. One of the things I'd start with is the why do people commit crime? And you'd think that's that's easy. They want money. Yeah, but it's actually a little harder than that. Most of us want to be thought of as good people. Most of us, when we do bad things, we find a way to rationalize it explicitly because we still want to think we're good people. So it gets pretty complicated. So why do people who think they're good end up doing crime? So I think there's a lot to unpack there. But I agree with you technically that you could probably sit there and sort out the sociopaths and say, okay, you don't get a right to vote and everybody else could. I just think it's unnecessary, and the reason why is because, first of all, sociopaths can actually be extraordinarily brilliant and intelligent people, and I don't know that they're necessarily going to make a better or worse decision on who should be president than me.
Yeah, and the other side of that coin is it's also they're far fewer in number, so it's not going to make that big a difference.
Exactly. So you'd be making all this effort to weed out a group that maybe arguably shouldn't have the right to vote, but what? Yeah. So so for me, it's just sort of like give it to them.
At what expense?
Yeah. Well, and then you're going to get the false positives. You're going to get that, and then you're going to get lawsuits. So it's just sort of like, listen, if you're an American citizen, you got the right to vote. Done.
Just simpler.
Yeah.
No, I agree with your argument. I'm just saying, if you wanted to approach it from the other side, you could, put in place wickets that you have to get through. The trouble is, who gets to decide what the wickets are, and who gets to enforce who gets to go through those wickets. And as we've seen in certain regions of the country, we very selectively manage those wickets to keep those people on one side and us people on the other.
Dorito wants to do we should do an episode on prison reform. I think we did. The last one we did was with Godless Mom, which was a long time ago. But I do think we should do that. The other thing is, of course, the civil forfeiture, which I'm strongly against. And I think Vermont just did away with it. The entire state of Vermont has done away with the concept of civil forfeiture, which I think is a really good. You mentioned civil forfeiture too, I think, on our a previous show, but the idea that basically if you had anything that you used in commission of that crime, it gets forfeit to the ostensibly the government. Really goes to the police. They sell it off at auction. Couple problems with that. One, it's a revenue source for the police, so they are on the side of, we're going to take all your stuff, and it only has to marginally have been, it's like, okay, he was living in this house while he was committing crime, so the house was, so we'll take the house, and people end up coming out of jail, sometimes in debt for their jail time. So you got to pay off your debt for having been in jail. Got no money, no job, and it's a horrific system. And that's why, again, I tend to frame things in education. So I just sit there and say, okay,
if we can't have a slave slant underclass one way, we'll get it another way. That's all it is.
I have a hard time being that cynical, but I also can't come up with a way to refute that.
My cynicism fills vast oceans.
Now, I remember we were talking. I don't remember if this is you were kind of a little less cynical until Iraq. Was that what did it, or did you always have that cynical streak in you? And it
widened at various points, but yeah, I think I've always been kind of a cynic about things. And growing up overseas, you kind of almost become unavoidable that way. My father was not until very late in his career, a senior member. His paycheck was not vast amounts of money, but even a junior officer in the U.S. service, the amount of money you make effectively puts you into the extreme upper class level when you're in a country like, say, post-war Japan, and I mean post-war like right after the war, where I was born, or in India. Places like that, you live like semi-royalty, even though you're not. And so you kind of get this sense of something is wrong here. How can I justify us having so much when there are people out there who have so little? There's something wrong with the human condition on planet Earth when this kind of thing happens.
That's one of my complaints with Occupy Wall Street and some of that. Now, it's not really far left, but it's starting to get there. I absolutely think that great sign of when a society is about to collapse is when there's too much disparity between the haves and the have-nots. And I think we've always been willing to and able to tolerate more than we say we will tolerate, but we'll tolerate a pretty good amount. But once it gets past a certain point, that's when a society starts to destabilize. And I think we're well past that point. So I am I'm sympathetic to those arguments. But the biggie is, the 1%. Right, and I think it was the World Bank or some UN organization came out and did a calculation. I think it was in 2015 of what the 1% really is, and the 1% in terms of U.S. I forget how much you have to be making. It's something like 400 and something thousand a year, and you're in the top 1% on the U.S. But worldwide, if you're in the U.S., if you're making $34,000 or more, you are in the top 1% on the entire planet. In India, they live on about 73 cents a day. The average U.S. citizen lives on $55 a day, which still isn't. That can be a tight amount.
Yeah, but at the same time, you have to adjust for price, cost
standard of living. Yeah. Absolutely, I completely agree. But the amount of people in India who are homeless, and what happens to the homeless in India versus the homeless in the U.S., right? I mean, if you're homeless in the U.S., homeless is homeless. Homeless just sucks ass. But if you go into a Wendy's,
one of my dad's favorite stories, similar to this, is he'd been asked to try to not recruit, but at least make contact with and assess whether he was worth recruiting. Was some guy who'd come from, I don't remember what country, but it was in this Mozambique or something, a country that is at the time was very pro-Soviet bloc. They were kind of in that group, and he'd come to, I think, lecture at a university for a semester or something. And so my dad made contact with him, and they became actually friends. And at one point, because my father was always taking him to, nice restaurants or nice places. And at one time he goes and says to my dad, "Hugh, I really want to see this place." And this place was effectively the deepest, darkest part of the ghetto in D.C. Now, I don't know D.C. well enough to say what it is, but it was, really, really considered by everybody in that area the worst ghetto or part of the ghetto. And my dad said, "Well, it's not really safe to go there today." "You're trying to hide this from me. I've heard, and everybody in Africa knows, that this is the sign of the white man's oppression of the black man in your country, and you're trying to hide it from me." He said, "Okay, you want to go? We're going to go." So he drove him down to that place, and he was looking around as they're driving through this part of the ghetto. And he says, "What is wrong with these people?" My dad said, "What do you mean?" He said, "Look at these buildings. These buildings are where, our upper middle class would be living in our country. The streets, they're in wonderful condition. And he's just going on and gushing about how great the conditions in what we saw is the darkest, evilest part of the ghetto. For him, it was like, this is where wealthy middle class people live. Why are these people so disrespectful of themselves to allow themselves to live in these kind of conditions of not picking up their trash, of defecating on the street and everything? They should be proud of a neighborhood like this." And my dad tried to explain to him, "Yeah, but you're talking about different relative levels of wealth. In your country, this neighborhood would appear to be middle class. Mm-hmm. In this country, it's not. It's the lowest of the low."
Yeah.
And it was an eye-opener to both my dad and this guy that's the way they were thinking.
Yeah. Well, so that's I think that's important to understand. For me, though, it's sort of like, okay, in Africa, infant starves to death every 14 seconds, I think it is. And
something like that, yeah.
Yeah. So it's sort of like we absolutely have inequality and it needs to be dealt with. But the passion that I see on the extreme, the furthest extreme of that position on the left that just sits there and is just like, we have to just tax the wealthy into the ground or this or that. And I was just like, what are you going to do with that money? You're going to keep it in the U.S., which is already the richest country in the world. If you really care about people, so I'm not fully cynical on it. I'm not sitting there saying, I think it's people who genuinely care, but I think it's people who care in a much more narrow scope than I feel I feel a little less empathy for the position because of
sure.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know. I'm not a Christian. I don't know who said it, but I've seen it attributed to Jesus. But whatever, it's something along the lines of there will always be poor. We're never going to eliminate it. The goal is to try to make it at least so that those people who are in that category are not living in total abject misery. To give them something, some respect, the ability to, the basic freedoms, life, liberty, pursuit of happiness kind of thing.
I do think that's because it's always going to there's going to be a relative element to that position that you're going to have. What is it? Even the poorest in the U.S. nowadays do have access to cell phones. A number of them do have cell phones.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, so the poorest in the U.S. are carrying around devices that are more powerful than the computer on Apollo 11. It's like, I don't know why I went to Apollo 11.
Well, more to the point, a lot of the people who are carrying around cell phones in this country who are in the bottom 25% are carrying a device that has more computing power than computing power that you would find in the university computer at some universities in foreign countries. Everything is relative. You have to compare apples to apples and oranges to oranges, and then you have to decide how much blending you're willing to engage in of those two orchards.
Oh, excuse me. Yeah. Well, I nuance. That's one of the things that I just. That's where the skill comes in. Trying to balance. There's no. You can't apply maximal charity to everybody all the time because there are people who are just out to get you. They're out to beat the system. And if you can't identify and find these people, you're going to get screwed. But on the flip side, there's so much incentive to apply the least amount of charity to anybody you're talking to, any position that they're positing, that I hardly trust myself. When I want to sit there and say, oh, I don't like this person, I'm questioning their motives. It's like, okay, what do I get out of questioning their motives? And usually I get something. That doesn't mean I'm wrong, but it causes me to slow down a lot. Yeah, that's I think that's there's just I think that's it. I think it's wisdom, skill, experience, and you sit there and try to say, okay, this is what's reasonable and this is what's not reasonable. But yeah, it's getting a little out of control. The only other thing I was gonna bring up, and then I'm gonna need to get going. I think the fam is starting to head upstairs. But the other thing we did, we just right before this show, we did a overtime, the Liberty Council, which is branded by Southern Poverty Law Center as a hate group. And if you read much of what they post and talk about, you'll see why.
It's gotten to the point where anything that's liberty, freedom, or patriot automatically means it's extreme right wing.
We're at Pravda level shit with this. That is literally.
Yeah. That's for damn sure.
But I was learning Russian, but I was also learning the culture, right? I wasn't just learning the language. I was learning from. I had a private tutor who, the way he came to the U.S., and I always thought that they were kidding. They were like joking, the American kid. He had applied for a passport and to leave, which can be a death sentence in the Soviet Union at the time. But the way he was able to get through and get it all done was he bribed a guy with a case of scotch, and he talks about how he figured out how much he needed and why a case was the particular right amount. And we've had this discussion before. It's like, no, but if you're trying to get out of the country, a case of scotch apparently is the magical amount that you need to do just to get approved, before you're even out and to not get assassinated. So, but, he was telling, it's like everything in Russia, Orwell got his ideas specifically from Stalin. Everything in Russia is the opposite of what, so the most truthful newspaper is called Pravda, which means truth. And it's like we're totally getting that way. And I remember thinking, don't they see that? Don't they realize that everything's the double plus good? Exactly. And I'm just like, and I'm looking at everything being labeled patriot and liberty, and I'm just like, oh my God, this is what I was learning about in the Soviet Union, and this is what I saw, and I was looking at it saying, can't these people see that? And I'm like, oh God, I don't know. It's
yeah.
But so yeah, please.
I was going to say, interesting you bring up Orwell, because I've seen 2 cartoons recently. One more of a meme or a trope than a cartoon, but the first one was basically says Orwell was an optimist.
Yes, I've seen that.
The other one was a picture of Orwell reading a book which was, I think, 2020 year in review or something. He's going, holy shit.
That's a good one.
Yeah.
Well, and I was looking at the Liberty. We did this thing, and I was reading the Liberty Council's mission statement, and it was to advocate for religious freedom for all Americans. It's like, whoa, what? No. It's certainly not for atheists, not for Muslims, not for. It's just like it's right wing Christianity or nothing for this group.
My brand of religion, you're free to practice.
Exactly. Well,
if you don't, you're a bad person, and we will persecute you. What part of this do you not understand?
They just passed that law. I want to say it's in Texas. Somebody in live chat may correct me on this. Where it's going to be either Texas or it's going to be one of the usual suspects. I think it's Texas, where they said that basically if somebody donates "In God We Trust" sign to a school, the school has to accept it and put it up. And because everybody was like changing the orders of the letters or doing snarky things, they wrote it as carefully as possible. So it says it has to say "In God We Trust." It can't say anything else. It can't add punctuation. It can't do anything else. And it has to have a Texas flag and a U.S. flag. It can't have any other flags. And so they just did all this thing. And so somebody was just like, okay, fine. So he submitted it, and that's exactly what it said. It just said it in Arabic. and I guess somebody protested it, and it's just like, no, the law didn't say it had to be in English. So the school is going to have to put up
square one.
But yep. But it's all we think religion should be taught in schools, and we think that's the fair way to do it. It's like, oh, great. I can't wait to teach Mormonism. It's going to be a blast. Like, whoa, wait a minute. It's just like, okay, yeah. Okay, so it isn't that religions are taught in school. It's that your religion. Oh, God. I get this every now and then. I don't talk about it much anymore, but I used to.
Satan wants to do the school prayer tomorrow.
Yeah. Well, and they're actually, I think, again, in Texas, the Satanic Church is suing because they say that the right to an abortion is fundamental in their religious beliefs. So for religious freedom, you have to allow abortion. I was just like, wow, I'm on the side of Church of Satan on that one. There's something I never thought I'd say. I mean, fun people, but
going to be fascinating to see the number of conversions they get.
Oh, well, that was the joke,
All the mistresses of the wealthy oil barons,
That was a meme.
I converted to Satanism. I wonder why.
That was a meme I just saw, too. Speaking of memes, it's a pregnancy test, and it says, I wonder how many women took a pregnancy test today and discovered that they're Democrats. Oh, shit. Oh, dear Lord.
Well, I mean, to me, that's one of the key things, and it goes back to what we were talking about pretty much near the start of this whole discussion, is when you run out of ideas to make things better for people, the only message you can sell is hate. And that's where the Republicans have descended to at this point. They no longer really have a viable political policy that they're trying to sell to the country. Nothing constructive. It's all about taking things away from people, denying people this. You know, it's vote for oppression.
Somebody had done a TikTok, which I thought was pretty amazing and reasonably on the ball. And they said that the reason Trump, somebody had asked, why are so many people willing to put everything on the line for Trump, who ostensibly doesn't really have any values of any kind and objectively doesn't represent the coal miner or any of these other people who are willing to go to jail for him, because they're sitting there saying, well, Trump wanted us to take the Capitol, so we're going to do. So why are people doing that? And what she said was, if you look at the people who are doing this, they are people who tend to not have a lot of capital in terms of money. They don't have wealth. They don't have power. But what Trump is telling them is that they're have
not the poor either.
No, they are not. And that's necessary, because what Trump is doing is telling them that they're inherently better than everybody else. And so he's giving them a different kind of capital. He's giving them social capital. He's giving them this ability where they can say, I don't even want to be wealthy, because those are the people who are causing the problems. And I'm inherently, and this is why he appeals so much to white nationalists and he brings that out in his supporters. I thought that was interesting. It's like, okay, he's giving them a different kind of capital. He's giving them power.
Very definitely. Yeah. But the other part of that is that in order to make that message fully appealing, you have to paint the other side in negative terms. So it automatically becomes the Democrats are trying to empower and enrich the minorities who are your natural enemies. So it's a two-pronged assault. It's 𝐂𝐚𝐥𝐥. They're trying to encircle you with, you're great because you're white, they're evil because they're the minorities.
Oh, dear Lord. Well, and I remember the canary in the coal mine for me was a Holocaust survivor who was leaving the U.S. This was about 4 years ago, maybe. I think it was before Trump actually got into office. And she said she was leaving the U.S. And I'm like, why are you leaving the U.S.? She's like, I've seen this before. I know where this ends.
Damn sure.
Yeah, that was terrifying. Because I was just like,
this really does feel like Weimar Germany in like 1930 or 1931, just before 32 election, when the Nazis gained a big chunk of the Reichstag.
So I think I've asked you this before, and I may keep asking you. My thinking is the answer may change from week to week. But do you think they're going to arrest Trump and or charge him with something criminal? And if so, what happens then?
That's a really good question. It's three questions, so we'll answer them. One, will they arrest him? And my sense is that they won't arrest him. They will prefer charges, and he'll be allowed to continue to, roam the grounds of Mar-a-Lago in his bathrobe, muttering obscenities, and throwing, French fries at the wall or whatever. Because arresting a president, even one as clearly deranged as this guy was, or is, arresting an ex-president sets a dangerous precedent in a lot of people's minds, because you start going down the road of what you saw with Imperial Rome, or Republican Rome for that matter, where patricians who were sent overseas to command armies in consulorships or as governors of occupied provinces. And because, time delays and everything, they were sent out there for express periods of, 2 years, 5 years, what have you. When they would return, it was almost pro forma. When you got back, you were almost immediately put under investigation and indictment for crimes you committed while you were out doing whatever your job was. And it was because that was the way business was done. If they were your political opponent, you immediately did this. And that in turn encouraged people that were in those positions when they were outside to be as corrupt as physically possible, taking as much wealth out of said province or stealing it from the army or whatever you wanted to enrich themselves so they'd be able to defend themselves when they got home. And so I don't see that they're going to want to arrest him. But I do think at some point we will see an indictment, and we'll proceed from there. The second question is, will they bring him to trial over it? Knowing Trump and knowing the way he takes suggestions from the people around him, I suspect that Trump he's so egotistical that they're going to tell him, no, let's do a plea bargain, find some way to minimize the damage done to you and your empire. But he's a counterpuncher. So he's going to turn down anything that is suggested along those lines. He is going to almost demand a trial because he believes that he can win in the court of public opinion. He can stand up there and just do one of those rambling diatribes that has become his hallmark. And, 75% of the nation will rise up in arms and overthrow the Democrats, and I will be free and reappointed to Emperor of the United States, and I'll seize the airports and stop the British from landing, and what have you. That's the kind of twisted brain that the man has. Yeah. So I do think we will get to, in a circuitous roundabout behind the garden shed, we'll get to a trial at some point. What form that's going to take, I don't know. What the charge he's going to be brought up in is, I don't know. But I do think we will eventually get to that stage. And then your third part of that question is, what happens when that occurs? I think Trump is going to, as he did with January 6th, try to get his supporters to rise up and save him. And I think at this point, most of them are beginning to realize, even if they won't admit it, but, in their secret, never talked about dark corners of their mind.
Dark places, yes.
Yeah, and those are pretty dark, let's be honest. They're beginning to realize that there's all smoke and mirrors and there's no fire. So, yeah, a few wackadoodles, Bubba and his beer-guzzling fishing buddy are going to take their rifles and go shoot at the police station or something somewhere. Yeah, you'll get that kind of stuff, but it won't be organized at any level worth mentioning. And it'll all just fizzle out, but it will be further evidence of just how broken and corrupt, and I don't mean corrupt in the classic sense, but mentally corrupt, the processes that are going on with that whole movement are.
Does somebody like DeSantis, do you think, try to take up the mantle, or do people say, let's have
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, there's a basket of money sitting there. Somebody's going to pick it up. It ain't going to sit there in the middle of the crossroads for the next 50 years. Yeah, and that one of them is going to grab the reins and try to get the pony to turn ever so slightly towards the center so he can have a sense of slight legitimacy. But I think, kind of as happened after Nixon got caught with his hands in a cookie jar and resigned, I think it's going to take a while for the Republicans to recover from the damage all this is going to do. The only real question is how long it's going to take before we get to the point where that damage is done, if you follow my logic there.
Yes, I do. So, okay, I'm going to wrap this up. Before we go, I want to say one or two quick things. Since I call them quick, grab some popcorn. This is going to be a long night. First of all, Lance, I want to say thank you so much for coming on. And I know, I think you've got some idea as to why I value these conversations. First of all, I think they're a lot of fun. I always learn. Second of all, you and I have so much in common that, like, I feel like we can kind of riff off each other and do a good thing. You've done the show either downtime or off time or whatever we're calling it now, in time, a few others, and you've seen some of the different formats, the breaking news, the discussions, so on and so forth. But I've been doing this for a while, and I know our audience, and it's geared in a very specific way. So you always joke, and I know it's tongue in cheek. I know it actually isn't one of those, like, real self-deprecation. You're like, oh, they're going to be so bored when I come on, and so on and so forth. I think you know that you are valued here, but I do want to point something out. The average watch duration on YouTube is 9 minutes, and they tell people to actually try to make their videos no longer than 9 minutes, because most people who watch YouTube won't sit around for that long, and there is a lot of truth to that. Yeah. We have a whole bunch of metrics on our shows. I'm looking at the back end right now, so I can tell how many people are watching live. I actually can't tell because they're two different numbers. They both say that, and they're never the same number, so I have no idea which one to believe. But they're usually off by about 10 or 15%.
You get something reliable.
Yep. But it also tells me how long people have been watching. And you got to keep in mind that this also includes, like, somebody comes in, watches for 10 seconds and bails. That gets factored into the average view time. So that's 10 seconds that gets factored into the average view time. So I can see, I can see the back end. Again, 9 minutes is usually considered the upward spike. This show is averaging what we average when you're on, which is 26 minutes and 9 seconds. That's the average view for this show. So I am clearly not the only one who thinks that having you on is of value. I genuinely appreciate it. I just love these discussions. Frankly, if our numbers dropped to 0, I'd still be doing it. But it's always a delight to talk with you, Lance. So I really appreciate you coming on. And if anybody in the live chat wants to say thank you to Lance, because he knows his shit, and there isn't anybody here who's listening to this who could possibly argue with that statement. And so it's always fun to have him on, but it's also always
the other thing they could post is, please make the bad man go away.
Please. Listen, my wife finds me in the corner of the room, arms wrapped around my legs, just muttering that every other night.
Oh, Lordy.
So thank you so much for joining us. Now, we had spoken a while, and I had sort of vaguely remembered that you might not be free next week, but if you are, would like to have you back. Perfect.
The way things on my schedule look right now, Thursday evening is clear. Thursday morning is a pile of horse dung, but that's another matter.
Well, and and we're already getting thank you, Lance, in the live chat. So thank you all for that, because I want to make sure that don't want him to get a big head and walk around like he's a big swinging dick or nothing. I've still got my hand on the mute button, but
you know how people get nicknames when you're in the military often. Mm-hmm. You know what mine was?
What was yours?
The 50-pound brain. So, I need a big head, so it is swelling up.
Yeah, okay. Well, and to tell you the truth, I sometimes do my own modesty, if for no other reason than if I start to believe my own press. Nobody likes me less than when I believe my own press. So I've been there. But what was I going to say? I also know, I'm hoping that Azandring is going to, I think Azandring had said that he wanted to do a couple of hangs with you and just chat. It would be similar to this. I'll be producing, but it would just be you and Azandring. I imagine they'd go in a different direction, but wherever they go is where they go. That's kind of the point of this, which is it's just chats. Now, before I always get suspicious because it almost seems, it does seem spooky. There have been shows where we've done breaking news and we get a little tired, and I was like, okay, night folks, and then literally the credits are rolling and all of a sudden I get a ding and I was just like, I really probably shouldn't check that. I was like, I have to fucking check it, and I look and there's more news and it's just like, boom, we go right out of credits and there we go. So and that's happened more times than can possibly be coincidence. I don't think there's I don't think there's a grand puppet master or anything like that, but it fucking happens. Anyways, I was getting ready to go. Yeah, Titan's saying it now, CDMs. I'm aware. Thank you. He's in the live chat telling me to see DMs, but I was literally wrapping this up. I'm about to hit the credits button, and then he goes, and then I hear this ding. So, what we do know, yeah, please.
I was going to say, in the wargaming industry, there's a joke about that, too. There's a designer who had a propensity for designing games on potential wars where, you had a crisis escalating, and he'd design a game and publish it about that crisis. And the old swag was, if Ty designs a game on that particular crisis, it will never break out into an actual war.
Sorry, if you what?
If Ty, the guy I'm talking about, if he designs a game on that particular crisis, it will not break out into an actual war. And sure enough, when the Ukrainian crisis was escalating, everybody said, quick, Ty, design a game. No, it's a topic I'm not interested. Guess what?
So we could actually blame him for the invasion.
Yes, I think we should.
I think we should. I think that's fair. So we do have, and I think this is worth mentioning. I'm not sure we're going to go to breaking on this, but quite frankly, I'm going to look into it on the off chance we may be going to breaking in about 5 minutes after this goes down.
Fun.
Yeah, we've had worse. I think I told you it was probably my favorite week during the show. And I think for the same reason that I really loved working on a live presidential campaign. Every skill you have is being used all the time. I mean, you got to use everything and you're operating at 110% for extended periods of time on no sleep, and there's something about that I really like. For us, that was when Iran fired rockets into the green zone in Iraq, and World War III was trending on. We've talked about that. Was I think my favorite, because it was literally, it's like I remember I go to bed and literally the phone would ring and I was like, did I actually manage to get to sleep or not? And I couldn't tell, and I'd look, 30 seconds have passed. And I pick up the phone and I was like, this better be a joke. Yeah, it's like, this really better be a joke. And it's my co-host, and he's just like, so Trump just said that we're going to keep Iran or somebody out of the UN and they can't come in. I was like, he can't do that. That's in the charter. The host country can't. He goes, yeah, that's what I've been told. He goes, and he's also saying that we're going to bomb all their cultural sites. I was like, isn't that a work? Do we have a lawyer we could talk to? I don't think you can. He's just like, do you think I should be warming up? Yes, warm up the thing. We're going to go live. Fuck. So that was a week. But Kelly Sorrell, lawyer for the Oath Keepers, has been charged with conspiracy. So this is their lawyer, which isn't, they try to avoid charging lawyers for kind of the same reason, really, that we were talking about. They don't want to charge a president. She says that Stone, Alex Jones, and Alexander were the leaders of January 6th, so she's throwing Alex Jones under the bus. Now, we've suspected this. We also have very good reason to believe that, what's his name from Fox News?
Carlson.
Tucker Carlson, thank you. I was going to say, like, Stalin light. Not Stalin, it's really Hitler. We've been making too many.
Accurate description.
Yeah. I figured that would just be too on the nose. Anyways,
Stalin without the bad mustache.
He did. He refused. He canceled 2 shows immediately after it was discovered that Alex Jones's phone had been turned over to the opposition, and that they had turned it over to the January 6th. And somebody from Fox News as having said that he was saying that essentially he was in deep shit. They said something else that was even more colorful than that, but that whatever's on that phone, I strongly suspect he had a lot to do with the 6th, but what we know of him so far, he was actually trying to tamp it down, at least some. But at any rate, Alex Jones, Roger Stone, and Alexander were the leaders of January 6th. She has previously indicated to CNN that she was cooperating by handing phones over to the FBI. So she has now been indicted. So she's been indicted in D.C., grand jury. What is it? Count 1, conspiracy to obstruct official proceedings, obstruction of official proceeding, and aiding and abetting, entering and remaining in a restricted building, or was she at the? I don't know. There's more counts than I have here, so we'll look into that. That's important because if she's flipping, and we're actually starting to see people flip. I don't think we've seen the dam break on people flipping. I do think we've seen that there's enough blood in the water now that people are going after Trump seriously, and I think we've seen the dam break on that. I think we're still at the. I mean, the dam's there, but the water's coming through. The dam is breaking on.
The big crack is there, but we haven't had the foundations collapse yet.
Yes, thank you. I think that's exactly what I'm struggling to say. So
I have to admit, I have a certain personal preference. I'm waiting to see Flynn get it.
That's interesting. That's interesting that you say that. I think I can guess why. I
think he's been a major planning element in all this.
Everything I've seen and that we've covered since then strongly suggests that he was in that yelling match in the Oval Office trying to encourage Trump to press the gas on this, and being told by members of the Justice Department and the FBI that he really can't fucking do it. All Trump had to do, Obama said, don't use Flynn. Don't use Flynn. All Trump had to do was not use Flynn. To be fair, what Obama should have said was, hire Flynn, you want him to be your right-hand guy. Flynn would never have seen another day in the Oval Office if Obama had said that.
Reverse psychology works so brilliantly on that guy.
Yeah, he's stuck at 12. He is stuck at 12. Okay, so
that's an insult to a lot of 12-year-olds I know.
Oh, to be fair, yes, but I had to study childhood psychology. I am qualified to make these determinations. I'm a teacher, and I'm sitting here going, if I was making a psychological evaluation, I'd say 12. And I felt so justified when some psychologist came out and said, "Yeah, he's stuck at 12." I was like, "See?" I was telling my wife, "See?" She goes, "Yeah, you got your certificate like 20 years ago." It's just like, I still got it, baby. We're going to keep an eye on it. She had previously indicated, so, I mean, if she's cooperating, I don't know why they're indicting her. There could be any number of reasons. They may have already told her we're going to indict you, but we'll take it easier. Maybe there's I don't know. But the way this is written is misleading. It suggests that she has handed over the phone since the indictment. What this is actually saying is that she's been cooperating and she's now since been charged. So this may not be a huge thing. The only reason I think it could potentially be huge is if she's going to flip on Jones, Stone, and what's his name? If she's going to flip on all of them, and I mean, who knows what's on Alex Jones's phones? But I think we're going to find out, and I think it's going to be big. I think Tucker Carlson's going to be involved, but I will bet you there's something we're missing. We haven't seen what's going to tie all this together, and I think it's there. I just don't know what it is yet. I don't know what your opinion is, but
no, I think you're right. I think you have to have somebody playing Goebbels for the Fuhrer.
Yes,
and, I think that's the guy who was running for that particular office.
Yep. All right. Well, thank you again for joining us. We will see you next week. We'll see if I know Andrew would love to chat with you a bit. So we could also do three of us. We've certainly done this with 3 or 4 people, but I also want to make sure Andrew gets a crack to hang with you. But once again, thank you so much for joining us. And
absolutely.
We'll keep an eye on shit. There's a lot to watch. So join us on the Discord if you want to see what we're
groweth.
And you've been on the Discord after every show, so I'm hoping that you'll still be free tonight and be able to come join everyone on the Discord. I got to say goodnight to the fam, and then I'll come in. So Commander McMillan will be in the Discord if anyone wants to chat with him. And like, subscribe, share. That always is a great way to help us out. So we really appreciate any help you can give us. And yep, we will see you there. Have a good night, all.